After my mother passed away, my sister secretly gave all the inheritance to my uncle, and when I found out, she put me in danger. Hi everyone, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you like this story, please share and let me know in the comment section. I will update the next part. My name is Angela. My mother passed away and left behind a legacy of 10,000 yuan. I thought this money could alleviate our living difficulties a little, but I didn't expect that my uncle would ask us to borrow money for a kidney transplant. I refused without hesitation, knowing that I would never get the money back. But my sister lent out all the money without telling me. Afterwards, she didn't apologize at all, and instead pointed at my nose and scolded me. How can you be so cold-blooded and have no sympathy at all? Later, my cousin wanted to get married, but didn't have a dowry. My sister came to me again with a bitter face and said, "Good sister, go and sleep with the old man. College students have good prices, and we can get the money together quickly." Hearing this, I was so angry that I trembled all over and turned away without looking back. However, what I never expected was that she pushed me into the traffic when I wasn't paying attention. At the scene of the accident, the ground was stained with blood. I was in so much pain that I lost consciousness, but I could vaguely hear her crying and shouting beside me, using my death to extort a large sum of compensation. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back to the day when my mother gave her will. I heard my mother's weak voice. "There is 10,000 yuan in this passbook. Zixing is my elder sister, so let her take it." "Absolutely not." I interrupted my mother decisively, and countless memories from my previous life that made me so angry that I wanted to vomit blood flashed through my mind. My sister is 3 years older than me. She has always been the teacher's favorite. She is both good in character and academic performance and is always helpful. This is her label and also her amulet. And me? I was lazy every day, my grades were terrible, I either slept or did little tricks in class, and the teacher even said I was a negative asset of the class. My mother always sighed and thought I needed guidance from my sister. And my sister did guide me, pushing towards the deep pit. In the previous life, my mother gave all her money to my sister because she was obedient and sensible. Before she died, she reminded her, money should be spent wisely. But my sister only remembered the blade and completely forgot whose blade it belonged to. The blade belongs to someone else, but the blood is mine. Why? Why give all the money to her? If we have to split it, just give it half to each of us. I shouted bluntly. My sister frowned, as if she was scolding a child with a bad temper. "Angela, you are so ignorant. Mom is so sick, and you are still thinking about the money. If you don't care, then don't take it. Just give it all to me." I sneered back, not giving her any face at all. My sister's face turned red because of my choking, and her lips trembled for a long time. Finally, she looked at my mother pitifully and said, "Mom, look at Angela. She is not obedient at all." My mother advised me, "Angela, your sister is steady, and I feel safe giving the money to her. When you grow up, your sister will naturally share it with you." I've heard this kind of talk so many times that my ears are calloused. It was the same in my previous life, but what I got was always the leftovers. Don't try to cheat me. Either we split the money in half right now, or I'm going to go out and jump into the river. I yelled, while exaggeratedly grabbing a chair and pretending to smash it. My mother was so frightened that her face turned pale. She was forced into a corner by my acting skills and finally compromised. She divided the passbook into two and gave them to me and my sister respectively. Holding my own 5,000 yuan, I sneered inwardly. In this life, no matter how she acts, I will never let myself suffer any loss again. "Okay, sister, now it's divided equally. You should feel relieved, right?" I looked at her provocatively and spoke slowly, word by word. The elder sister froze for a moment and forced a smile. "Sister, you are such a joker. The money belongs to our family, and we should all protect it together." Guard? In the previous life, she guarded me so well that she even protected me until I ran into traffic and almost lost my life. On the day I received the passbook, I directly booked a luxury seaside tour package for two, and the money I spent accounted for almost half of the balance in the passbook. My mother has always had a wish, which is to see the sea. But because of me and my sister, she was reluctant to even go on a trip to the suburbs, let alone the beach. So I deliberately hid it from her and signed up for the tour group, even saying, "If you cancel the tour, you won't get your money back. I can't afford the waste." "Angela, why are you such a naughty child? You spend money recklessly. This money is not for you to enjoy yourself." Mom frowned and blamed her, but her eyes could not hide the expectation. My sister immediately jumped out and said sarcastically, "Angela, this is Mom's hard-earned money. Don't you feel guilty for squandering it like this? Don't come to me to borrow money after you've spent it. I won't tolerate your bad habit." Her words were full of sourness, as if I was committing a crime by using the money to travel. I didn't bother to pay attention to her and packed my luggage directly, saying with a smile, "Sister, don't worry. I have my own money, so you don't have to worry about it." Without waiting for her to retort, I helped my mother into the car, drove straight to the airport, greeted the rising sun, and officially headed for the sea. My mother's health is getting worse day by day. I know it better than anyone else. In a month at most, she will be completely paralyzed in bed, and moving will become a luxury. So this trip can't be delayed. Even if it's a splurge, I'll accept it. Anyway, I want to spend the money on her. When we got to the beach, my mother was like a child, with her arms open to welcome the sea breeze, her white hair shining slightly in the sun. Her smile was so bright and dazzling, as if she had returned to her youth, and all her fatigue and illness were washed away by the orange sunlight. "Mom, it's windy. Don't catch a cold." I quickly took out my scarf and draped it over her shoulders. "Angela, you silly child." She pinched my face gently, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, my second daughter. Mom has no regrets in this life." At that moment, I couldn't help but have tears in my eyes. I could only pretend to look at the seagulls in the distance and secretly wipe away the tears that were about to overflow. The trip lasted a whole week. My mother passed away very contentedly. She smiled and closed her eyes, as if she had let go of the weight of life. Experiencing the eternal farewell to my loved ones again, I couldn't help but cry my heart out, as if a piece of my soul had been hollowed out. But after crying, I pinched my thigh flesh and told myself over and over again, "Angela Wu, don't indulge in sadness. There are still battles to fight." There is a strange custom in my hometown. When a relative dies, they will put a mouthful of gold in their mouth. It is said that this is to take away wealth. I knew it long ago. My mother has always treasured the pair of gold earrings that my father gave her when he got married. Although they are not big, they carry the love between my father and mother. My mother never wore them, and she was reluctant to do so, and she was afraid of losing them, so she just carefully hid them in a box. Before leaving, I took out the pair of gold earrings and gently put them into my mother's mouth, thinking that these were the most precious things in her life. Then, I stayed in the morning hall, not daring to take my eyes off my mother's body, because I knew that the last time I was keeping vigil for my mother, someone had secretly tampered with her, and the pair of gold earrings disappeared. At that time, the staff of the funeral home asked me to go out to do something. I was gone for less than 10 minutes. When I came back, the earrings in my mother's mouth were gone. It was not until before the burial that I discovered that my mother's mouth was slightly open. It turned out that the pair of gold earrings had been stolen. This time, I'm not going to let this happen again. I swore in my heart that no matter who dared to do this, I would make them pay the price. As expected, the funeral director soon asked me to go to the door to greet relatives and friends. I held onto my mother's coffin tightly and refused to let go. Seeing this, my sister had no choice but to go alone to greet the guests. Soon, my aunt also came, with tears in her eyes, and walked to my side in grief. "Angela, don't be too sad. Mom left too early." She began to pretend to comfort me, but she became more and more sad as she spoke, and finally she started to cry until she was hoarse, lying on my mother's coffin and wailing. "My sister has a miserable life. She passed away at such a young age. What will happen to Zixing and Angela in the future?" Her crying and wailing instantly moved everyone present to tears. I glanced at her from the side and saw that she was crying even more sadly, and she even quietly reached her hand into the coffin. I was startled and immediately alerted. "What is she doing?" My aunt first fixed my mother's hair, her fingers gently sliding across her face. But then, I watched her hands move slowly, as if with ulterior motives. After she finished crying and left, I stood up and walked to the coffin, and suddenly I found that my mother's mouth was slightly open. I felt a chill in my heart, and immediately realized that the gold earrings must have been taken away by her. I was immediately furious. I couldn't stand someone touching my mother's belongings at this moment. I shouted, "Who stole the gold earrings from my mother's mouth?" As soon as I finished speaking, everyone's eyes turned to me. The atmosphere suddenly became tense and silent, and everyone's eyes were full of doubt and anxiety. My roar attracted everyone's attention. Even my sister hurried in from outside with a hint of confusion on her face. The aunt was obviously stunned. Her expression was a little unnatural for a moment, but she forced herself to be calm and said, "Angela, don't talk nonsense. We are all relatives and friends who would steal things." I pointed at her nose and said resolutely, "I think you stole it. You were the only one who walked to the coffin just now." Before she could explain, my sister stopped me in a stern voice. "Angela, how can you be so ignorant? How can you point at your elders and talk to them? You have no manners at all." I was stunned and even angrier. I couldn't help but retort, "Sister, have you cleaned out the earwax? Can you listen carefully before you speak? What I'm saying is that my aunt stole my mother's gold earrings." My aunt's face suddenly changed. She immediately shook her fur coat and responded in a high-pitched voice. "Your mother's gold earrings only weigh 2 grams. Do I need to steal them? My clothes are worth thousands." I sneered and approached. "If you didn't take it, how do you know that my mother's earrings weigh only 2 grams? Otherwise, do you dare to let me search it?" Her face instantly turned pale, and she immediately shrank back, raising her voice. "I am an adult. Why should I let a little girl like you search me? Besides, there are so many people here today, and there are not a few staff members. Who knows if some dirty guy took your mother's things?" As soon as she finished speaking, the person in charge, obviously afraid of being blamed, quickly interrupted to support me. "Since that's the case, why don't we all search together? Who knows?" Immediately, the other guests nodded as well. Everyone turned their eyes to my aunt, and the air seemed to freeze in an instant. Sure enough, when I found the pair of gold earrings in my aunt's fur coat pocket, everyone was amazed. My aunt's face turned red, and she stammered, trying to shirk responsibility. "How did this earring end up in my pocket? Could someone be trying to frame me?" I growled angrily. "Aunt, you are so shameless. How dare you steal something from the deceased? Don't you feel guilty at all?" The relatives around her began to whisper. Some talked in low voices. Some looked at each other in bewilderment. My aunt finally realized that it was difficult for her to get out of this situation, and she was trying to come up with an excuse. At this moment, my ugly but kind-hearted sister stood up and actually spoke for my aunt. "This earring was given to Mom by Dad. Dad and Aunt were originally a family. Now that Mom is gone, the earring should be given to Aunt." I was simply stunned by her words, which were so seamless and seemed to make sense. My aunt finally found a life-saving straw and smiled smugly. "Yes, this is my family's property, so of course I can take it away." I sneered immediately, and a plan flashed through my mind. I immediately responded, "Dad still owes foreign debts. Since Aunt and Dad are family, why don't you pay off the debt for Dad?" When I saw my sister was about to speak, I quickly interrupted her. "Shut up." The aunt's face turned extremely ugly, and the original pride disappeared in an instant. She was so angry that she snorted. "You are dreaming," she said something angrily, and without further ado, she turned around, patted her butt, and walked away. After the funeral, the so-called relatives began to flock to our house like pigeons waiting to be fed, under the pretext of helping my mother to collect her belongings, and kept saying such good things should not be wasted. Our tiny house was packed to the brim with people, leaving barely any breathing space. Each relative took his or her share, as if they were really dividing up the family fortune. The aunt walked to my mother's closet, took out clothes one by one, and said with pretended regret, "Your mother is so unlucky. The clothes are so beautiful. Why doesn't she wear them properly?" Although she said so, she couldn't hide the smile on her face, and it was obvious that she didn't take the regret in her words seriously. She sorted out her clothes and chose, "This cashmere coat is just right for winter. I'll take it." After packing her coat, she looked at a pair of jeans and turned to the woman next to her and said, "Fourth sister, didn't you say you wanted to buy a pair of pants? The waist of these pants is about the same as yours. Take them and wear them." There was a loud banging noise from the kitchen, as if someone was fighting. Then a woman shouted, "Don't you think it's unlucky to wear clothes that have been worn by a dead person? But his casserole and rice cooker look pretty good, so I'll take them. Don't fight with me for them." I sat on a small stool, crossed my legs, and leisurely watched them fight over these so-called relics. I couldn't help but sneer in my heart as I watched them divide the family with great fanfare. Why didn't I sit on the sofa? Because the sofa was full of uncles and aunts who I had no close relationship with. They were surrounding my sister, and the atmosphere was more tense than the stock market. My sister had already handed the property certificate to them obediently, with her eyebrows downcast, looking extremely obedient. The property certificate was like a gold medal, and they took it very seriously. At this time, A dark-skinned uncle stood up and said with a somewhat dignified tone, "This old house in this area can't be sold for much money. I'll contact the agent to put it up for sale. After it's sold, the five of us will split it equally." The other four people didn't react at all, and the atmosphere was a bit stagnant. I took a bite of a melon seed and broke the silence. The information is not transparent. Who knows how much you sold it for? If you get the money, what if you don't share it with other uncles? As soon as I finished speaking, a man who claimed to be my cousin interrupted and said, "The little girl is right. I live far away, and I am not well informed. What if you sell the house without telling me?" I looked at the dark-faced uncle who was already somewhat angry and couldn't help but sneer with disdain in my voice. "Just now you said to divide it equally. Now the uncle eats the meat and the cousin drinks the soup? Besides, the house is the common property of the couple. The relatives on my father's side can share it, but the relatives on my mother's side can't share it." My cousin's face changed immediately after hearing what I said. He stood up suddenly, snatched the property certificate from my uncle's hand, and said with glaring eyes, "I think it's safest for me to sell this house." The atmosphere suddenly froze, and everyone's eyes were focused on us. No one had expected things to become so complicated. Seeing the property certificate being snatched away, the situation immediately became tense. Several men stood up and quickly split into two groups, and the atmosphere was about to explode. The dark-faced uncle's face turned even darker, and he cursed and pointed at his cousin. "Don't be so shameless. Hurry up and bring the property certificate over." I watched this scene and couldn't help but applaud. Uncle is so domineering. Some people are born like walnuts. You have to smash them to know. He turned around and gave his cousin a thumbs up. Uncle is young and energetic. How could he be easily frightened? But some people look arrogant. But in fact, they are just fools. My cousin was inspired by my words and straightened his back. He held the property deed tightly and said arrogantly, "I won't give it to you. What can you do to me?" As soon as he finished speaking, the black-faced uncle punched my cousin in the face with a deafening sound, and my cousin staggered back immediately. Then, the five of them rushed together as if they were fighting, punching, and kicking each other, and the scene was extremely chaotic. I sat on a small bench nearby, crossing my legs. The police officer looked at her coldly and didn't seem to be shaken by her plea. My sister's voice became more and more urgent. "Uncle, please. These people are my father's brothers and sisters. All relatives. You misunderstood. We can't live without them." I stood by and looked at my sister's expression, and I felt a little unwilling. Her crying tone and her performance really gave me a headache. I secretly took out my phone to record the scene while smiling coldly. "Don't worry, the police are just investigating a case. Can relatives bully each other? They sold my house and didn't even leave a little dignity for me and my sister." The policeman remained silent, as if he was tired of hearing the relatives' explanations. Seeing that they were not going to let me go, I couldn't help but feel a little happy. This time, I won't let them succeed so easily. This is not only for the house, but also for my own dignity. When the police took these relatives away, my sister still struggled unwillingly, turned her head to look at me, and said in a low voice, "Angela, is it really okay for you to do this? If you can treat even your relatives like this, will we have anywhere to go in the future?" I looked at her coldly, with an inexplicable bitterness in my heart. "Do you think I can let you use these means to kidnap me again? In the last life, we were suppressed by them and had to be humble. In this life, I will not let anyone succeed again." The police officers finally took these people away, but my sister and I still stood at the door, listening to the noise outside gradually fade away. This chaos finally came to an end, but I know that this is just the beginning. This time, I will no longer be that silly girl who lets others manipulate me. I will make those who hurt and bully me pay the price one by one. My sister stood beside me with a complicated expression. She looked at me with a hint of resentment and deep helplessness in her eyes. "Angela, you have changed now." "Yes, I have changed," I answered calmly and made up my mind. This time, no one can make me bow my head. I looked at my sister in disbelief, feeling helpless and angry. She actually scolded me for calling the police to arrest her elders at a time like this. This was simply unbelievable. "Wu Zixing, did you shit your brain out?" I couldn't help but growl. I was about to explode with anger. My sister glared at me, her lips curled up, her eyes full of anger. "How dare you call the police? Aren't you afraid that your family will always remember this stain?" Her voice was as sharp as a knife and merciless. I really wanted to pin her down and give her a good lesson, but I held back my anger and sneered, "You are the one who is really rebellious. Don't you feel ashamed to help your aunt do this kind of thing?" The peaceful days didn't last long, and my aunt came to my house. As soon as she entered the house, she slapped me without any mercy, and I saw stars. "You little bitch, you cursed my family to be punished by God and caused my uncle to have uremia. I will beat you to death." Her voice was sharp and piercing, as if she was crazy. I was so angry that I grabbed her curly hair and slapped her twice. If she hurt me, I would hit her back twice as much. This is my principle. My aunt pounced on me like crazy, but I dodged nimbly and watched her return empty-handed with a smile. Seeing this, my sister hurried to comfort my aunt, as if she was afraid that she would be angry. After a long time, my aunt finally calmed down a little, sighed and said, "Angela, Zixing, your mother was always working before she died, and she must have left some money. Can you lend it to me first?" I felt upset and thought, "How dare you ask for the money my mother worked so hard to earn?" My elder sister immediately stood up and walked towards the drawer. Her eyes lit up. "And my mother left me and my sister 10,000 yuan each. She told us that the money should be used where it matters most. It's important to treat my uncle's illness. I'll go get the money for you right away." My sister walked to the locked drawer, where her passbook was. Suddenly alert, I hit her key in advance. In her previous life, my sister gave all her savings of 200,000 yuan to her aunt because of her sweet talk. After she was admitted to university, she wanted her aunt to pay her back, but her aunt looked innocent and said, "Are you trying to kill me? Your uncle is on dialysis every day. How can I give you money?" My sister had no choice but to bow her head and said, "Aunt, please give me some money first so I can pay for the tuition." My aunt looked impatient and said with a pout, "I don't have any money, but I have my life. Chop off my head." My sister was forced to dig her fingernails into the table, not knowing what to do. Seeing this, my aunt softened her tone and said, "Zixing, look at the current era. There are so many college students. It's better to work early and gain experience. The boss of the brick factory near us is only a junior high school student, and all the workers are college students. What's the point of going to school?" My sister was stunned and seemed to have heard what my aunt said. My aunt continued, "You might as well start working early to reduce the burden on the family. Don't worry, Aunt One will remember it in her heart. When your cousin graduates from college and makes a lot of money, she will return the principal and interest to you." I sneered, knowing the outcome. My sister was persuaded by my aunt to give up her studies and work as a waiter in a restaurant. Her monthly salary was either used to subsidize my uncle's medical expenses or to support my cousin's living expenses. By the time I went to college, my uncle had passed away. I thought about asking my aunt for money, but she said, "All the money has been spent on your uncle. Go ask him for it." All the money my mother had worked so hard to save for her whole life was gone. Looking at my sister, I couldn't help but sigh in my heart. Maybe she was really instigated by my aunt to make such a heartless decision. If I could analyze it rationally for her and make her understand the interests involved, perhaps she would calm down and stop lending money to her aunt so easily. My sister paced back and forth in the room anxiously, and finally sighed and decided to let my aunt go back first and then deliver the money in person later. Seeing my sister's sad face, I couldn't bear to watch any longer, so I pulled her to sit down and patiently reason with her. "Sister, we are just two poor students with no income. Why didn't Aunt go to those rich relatives to borrow money, but had to go to us?" She was stunned for a moment and seemed a little hesitant. I continued, "My uncle's illness is like a bottomless pit. It can never be filled. What if my aunt can't pay back the money she borrowed from us? The money that Mom has worked hard to save all her life is for us to live on. How can she lend it to outsiders so easily?" I stared into her eyes, trying to make her understand my thoughts. However, my sister looked at me with disbelief in her eyes. "Angela, I didn't expect you to be so scheming. Aren't relatives supposed to help each other? Have you forgotten that when Mom was in the hospital, Annie was so kind as to make porridge for her?" I sneered. "You think we are helping each other, but are we giving money to Aunt to cure her illness? You also know that the money that Mom saved all her life is for our living, not for Aunt as a lifeline." My sister seemed not to understand what I said and continued to blame me. "School teaches us to help others, but you are so mean. You are so calculative about that little money when it comes to your life. It would be fine if you didn't want to lend it, but you try to stop me. I am really ashamed of you." I was speechless for a moment, looking at her like a hen with its feathers blown off, and I sighed. Since I couldn't convince her, I could only do something else. "If you really want to borrow money, ask your aunt to write an IOU," I suggested calmly. My sister responded as if she had heard a fairy tale. Are you sick? She is our only aunt. How can we have the nerve to ask her to write an IOU? I smiled bitterly in my heart. It was obvious that no matter how much I said, it would be like talking to a cow. Did you hide the key? She looked at me suspiciously, with a hint of doubt in her eyes. I felt disappointed. If I had known she would not listen to me, I would not have. It seems that all I said was in vain. I sighed and shook my head helplessly. Tofu has brains, but you don't. I knew in my heart that the money my mother had saved with great effort was to leave us hope and life security, and should not be given to my aunt as life-saving money. But I still did not give the drawer key to my sister, preferring to bear this responsibility myself. The next morning, when I opened my eyes, I found the drawer had been opened. My sister took the key while I was sleeping and lent all the money to my aunt. I smiled a little bitterly. Even if I were reborn, I still couldn't change you. Maybe this is your fate. I shook my head helplessly and decided not to dwell on it anymore. My sister seemed to have fallen into a darkness from which she could not escape, while I began to live more and more freely and unrestrainedly. My sister's excitement after being admitted to university lasted less than a week. Next, she ran to her aunt to ask for money. However, when she came back, I only saw her face full of disappointment, holding the originally exciting acceptance letter in her hand, and she tore it into pieces without any emotion. Anne is right. College students are worthless nowadays. If you want to find a job outside, you have to work for others. It's better to start working early and get the money in your hands and feel at ease. Her words almost made me spit out a breath. I retorted angrily. Since going to college is not a good idea and my cousin has failed the college entrance examination, why would my aunt rather let him take tutoring for a year than send him to college? My sister seemed to have heard a great secret and hurriedly explained. My aunt said that boys need more experience, so there is no problem. But I am a girl, and I have to go so far to study. Who knows what will happen in the future? Besides, girls will have children and take care of the family. Even if they go to college, they may not be able to find a job. She lowered her head, her eyes dim, and continued. My aunt has found me a job as a restaurant waiter. I will go to work tomorrow. Hearing this, I was already disappointed. Sister, your grades are so good. Why did you give up everything? You were admitted to a first-class university, and 4 years of perseverance can change your fate. But you gave it up for a job as a waitress in a restaurant? I simply couldn't understand. My sister's grades were always among the best. She was the pride of the family and my mother's greatest hope. However, she was innocent and eventually deceived by her aunt and gave up the path that could have taken her further. Growing up, my sister's strengths have always been more than just good grades. She has always been a hard-working child and the person I admire the most. Seeing her make this decision, my heart aches. I decided that I couldn't let my sister's life be changed like this. So I glued the admission letter together, withdrew some money from the bank, and handed it to her in a serious tone. You must stick to your studies and don't be blinded by your aunt's words. My sister's eyes lit up, seeing the money and the notice. She seemed particularly happy and nodded repeatedly in agreement. I will definitely stick to it. Thank you, Angela. She turned around and took the money to find her aunt. Seeing this, I was so angry that I almost went crazy. My uncle is so pitiful. We have the ability. Why don't we help them? We save a life. Why don't we lend a hand? I was so angry that I was shaking, but my sister still insisted on her decision and eventually dropped out of school. Not long after, my sister told me excitedly, my aunt wants to adopt me. I have a father and a mother again. Hearing this, I frowned and felt uneasy. My aunt is not a selfless person, and I am afraid she has a purpose. Sure enough, not long after, my sister moved to my aunt's house and lived there for more than half a month, and the truth was finally exposed. My sister said to me worriedly, Dad's health is getting worse and worse. Mom wants to give him a kidney, but she doesn't have enough money. I plan to sell the house and use the money to pay for Dad's medical treatment. At that moment, when I heard my sister call my aunt Mom and my uncle Dad, I felt an unprecedented heartache. She actually wanted to sell my mother's house for my uncle, which made me so angry that my blood boiled instantly. I pointed at her and gritted my teeth and said, Wu Zixing, all your lack of wisdom is due to my aunt. Her family also has a house. Why don't you sell hers? The elder sister did not show any weakness and responded coldly. There are 4 people living in Mom's house. How can you sell it? It's a waste for you to live in a big house by yourself. Just sell it. Saving people is more important. Her words made me so angry that I almost lost control. Besides, I also have a share of the house. Why should you take it all? I was so angry that my fingers were shaking. I looked at her with a look of dismay. Mom was so seriously ill at the time that she was reluctant to sell the house. Now you're actually going to sell her house for someone else? The elder sister curled her lips with a hint of indifference in her eyes. I couldn't make the decision before. It was Mom who didn't want to sell it. Now I have lost my mom, and I don't want to lose my new dad, so I have to sell this house. At that moment, my heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. This house carries all of my mother's memories, and my sister gave it up so easily. I knew I shouldn't let her do this, but I didn't have enough money and couldn't argue with her, so I had no choice but to agree to sell the house. It's really sad to think that the house I once took back from my uncles and aunts was eventually lost to my own sister. Because we were in a hurry to sell the house, we only sold it for less than 200,000 yuan, and my sister and I each took half. After completing the formalities, my sister suggested that I have dinner. I reluctantly agreed, still filled with anger and resentment. During this time, my sister said she was thirsty and asked me to go to the counter to buy some water. While complaining about her, I went to the counter to buy some water, thinking that if she wasn't serious, I would just ignore it. When I returned to my seat with the water, I found that my sister was gone. I subconsciously touched my school bag, and my face suddenly changed. There was a bank card in the school bag, and the card contained the money from selling the house. My sister was right next to me when I was setting the password. I was extremely anxious and quickly chased after him. Fortunately, my sister has been obsessed with studying at school, has little exercise, and her physical fitness is not very good. I didn't run far before I saw her bending over and gasping for breath, obviously very tired. I quickly caught up with her, stood in front of her, and looked at her coldly. A trace of panic flashed in my sister's eyes, and she tightly grasped her school bag. "Angela, I beg you, can you? A kidney transplant costs 100,000 yuan. Please lend me the money first, and I will pay you back double when we get through this difficult time." Her appearance made me feel a little soft-hearted, but seeing how obsessed she was, I had already lost my patience. I said coldly, "Let go." But my sister held her school bag tighter, her mouth trembling slightly. "Angela, I really need this money." I didn't want to waste any more time arguing with her, so I kicked her on the shoulder. She staggered and fell to the ground. I picked up my bag and walked away, my heart filled with mixed emotions. I applied for accommodation from the school, and with the help of the school leaders, I was finally able to stay in the dormitory during the winter and summer vacations. Although the conditions are not as good as at home, the dormitory has a strong learning atmosphere. It is quiet and free of distractions, and I have more time to concentrate on studying the textbooks. The days passed peacefully, and I gradually adapted to this independent life, until a few months later, a local social news made the headlines. The wife cheated on her boss, and the sick husband attempted suicide. The faces of the people in the news were blurred, but I recognized my aunt and uncle at a glance because of their familiar figures. According to the news, my sister took care of my uncle almost all the time during his hospitalization, while my aunt often disappeared. My uncle became suspicious and secretly looked through my aunt's mobile phone, only to find out that she had an ambiguous relationship with her boss after she started working, and in recent months, there has even been a substantial breakthrough. The uncle was extremely angry, and the two had a fierce argument. Finally, the uncle lost control of his emotions and tried to commit suicide by jumping off the building. The news quickly attracted widespread attention on the internet, with the comment section almost entirely blaming the aunt, with many even using the extremely vile term slut-shaming. As I was browsing the comments, I suddenly saw a statement from my aunt herself. "I'm not a party to the case. I'm just speaking up for the lady in the news. I want to ask everyone here, the pillar of the family has fallen, and there is no source of livelihood. She is a weak woman who not only has to bear the medical expenses of her husband, but also has to take care of her son who is in school. Is it wrong to find a backer? She did not give up her husband and is still sticking to this family. She is already a remarkable woman." These words immediately triggered angry counterattacks from netizens, and the comments section exploded. Is this me? I can't figure out this fresh and unconventional train of thought. Although we are separated by a screen, I can smell the stench of scum. For those who like the post, I wish you have a wife who is as devoted as me. The aunt obviously did not expect things to develop in this way. She had a fierce exchange with netizens in the comment section, and even in her excitement, she revealed the issue of dialysis costs but did not mention the kidney transplant at all. I was confused, so I called my sister. The elder sister said in a low and lost tone, "My aunt cheated me. She used my money to buy a school district house for my cousin. I was stunned for a moment, and my sister continued. My aunt said that even if my uncle had a kidney transplant, he would not be able to do heavy work or make money in this life, and the resources must be left to valuable people. After listening to my sister's story, I felt a little complicated. My sister was obviously devastated by this incident. She asked me, why didn't my aunt want to save my uncle? He had been with her for more than 30 years. The school district house can be bought later, but human life cannot be delayed. Why didn't my aunt understand? I was silent for a while, feeling helpless. My sister didn't understand because she had never experienced such a complicated thing. It's not that you don't understand, I said slowly, but you haven't fully seen through the complexity of human nature. My sister obviously didn't understand what I said. She continued to ask in confusion. What is that? I really don't understand. I sighed and continued. Sometimes, behind the deep love between husband and wife, there are complex conflicts of interest. People's hearts are unpredictable, and some people will not give up their own interests because of love. The elder sister still couldn't understand and was puzzled. But after all, it's a relationship of 30 years. How can you give it up just because of a house in the school district? I shook my head helplessly, feeling sorry for her naivety. She still couldn't understand the deep complexity of human nature and emotions. It's hard for you to understand, sister, I said softly, because you put too much of your own values into other people. What you think is right may not be seen that way by others. After this conversation, I deeply felt that my sister's ignorance made me feel a little heartbroken. I understand her feelings, but sometimes in the face of complex situations, simple values and goodwill may become the biggest constraints. After the news event, my aunt and uncle had a complete falling out. My aunt began to refuse to spend money on my uncle, and as a result, my uncle's condition deteriorated rapidly, and he passed away soon after. At that time, I was in my third year of high school, and my sister moved out of my aunt's house. I helped her find a rental house and move, but when I helped my sister pack her things, I was surprised to find that the clothes she brought out were still bought by my mother when she was alive. The clothes were washed and faded, loose, and had lost their original luster. I couldn't help but ask her, "Why don't you buy new clothes?" My sister lowered her head and said in a heavy tone, "Where can I get the money? All the money has been used to treat my uncle's illness over the years. In order to raise the cost of the kidney transplant, I borrowed online loans, and later I subsidized my cousin's living expenses. Every month, I can't make ends meet." After hearing this, I felt a pang of sadness. My sister has given so much, but she still doesn't get the due reward. I asked her again, "Why don't you continue to live in your aunt's house?" My sister's eyes flickered and she whispered, "It's not convenient. My aunt's boss comes to stay overnight from time to time. He looks at me with greasy eyes, which makes me feel uncomfortable." Hearing this, my mood sank again. My sister finally escaped from that devil's den, and I secretly felt lucky. As long as she let go of that endless desire to help others and live a peaceful life, the future will always be better. I comforted myself while continuing to devote myself to my heavy studies. After settling my sister down, I didn't think about these things anymore. However, as time went by, my sister's situation became something I couldn't ignore. In my second year of college, I found a part-time job as a tutor. One day, while I was helping with homework, my sister called me out of the blue. "Angela, do you have money? Can you lend me some?" Her tone set off alarm bells for me, and I quickly asked her why she wanted to borrow money. "I'm pregnant, and I want to have an abortion." There was obvious anxiety in her voice. I was stunned. I never expected that something like this would happen to my sister. I hurriedly asked her, "Do you have a boyfriend?" My sister's voice was so low that it was almost inaudible. "He's not my boyfriend, he's my aunt's boss." I felt a chill in my heart and could hardly believe my ears. "He raped you?" My sister's silence stung me. She continued, "Yes, he forced me." I felt a surge of impotent anger in my heart. My sister had been renting a house for the past 2 years, and her relationship with my aunt had gradually cooled. I never expected that something like this would happen in my aunt's house. My sister's voice was choked with sobs. More than a month ago, my aunt suddenly asked me to go home for dinner, so I went. When I got home, I didn't see my aunt, only her boss. Then, I can almost imagine her helplessness and pain at that time. My sister's tone continued to become heavy. After the incident, my aunt came back and begged me for forgiveness in tears. "Zixing, you are my good daughter. You have to share my burden. My boss has changed his mind, and I have no choice but to do this for my career and future." Hearing this, I clenched my fists, my nails dug deep into my palms. The pain was so severe that I almost forgot to breathe. Sister, you must sue them. Do you have any evidence? Do you have a recording of the incident or underwear with bodily fluids on it? My sister's voice was a little confused. Evidence? Underwear? She muttered it twice and suddenly laughed. No wonder my aunt was so kind as to help me take a bath and even wash my underwear. Hearing this, my heart was in turmoil and I could hardly breathe. At this point, I could only take a deep breath and try to comfort her. Sister, calm down. Don't do anything stupid. You must completely cut off contact with Aunt. But the truth is far more complicated than I imagined, and all this is far from over. I have emphasized countless times that my sister should stay away from my aunt, but I always overlooked one thing. That is, she should also stay away from her cousin. My cousin had a girlfriend in school, and after graduation, she wanted to get married, so the gift naturally became a problem. The aunt was unwilling to pay, so she asked her sister for the money. But her sister had already lost trust in the aunt and refused, saying that she had no money. But unexpectedly, my aunt sent my cousin to borrow money directly. It was the first time he asked my sister for money. My dear sister, I have never borrowed money from you. You have lived in my house for so long. Don't you trust me? Said the cousin innocently. Your sister-in-law said that the betrothal gift is just a formality. Bring all the money back as soon as the ceremony is over. I will return it to you as soon as possible. When the elder sister heard these words, she was persuaded again. She really wanted to help her cousin, but she really didn't have any extra money. It doesn't matter. There are many platforms now, and the loan approval process is very fast. My cousin smiled confidently, and it was obvious that he came prepared. He quickly searched for various lending platforms on his mobile phone. Seeing that his sister's attitude had softened, he immediately snatched the phone and downloaded a lending app. Come on, upload your ID card, do a facial recognition, and then you can submit your application. He excitedly pulled his sister to do it together. Soon, the loan application was submitted, and within 5 working days, 180,000 yuan was deposited into the account. My sister transferred the money to my cousin without hesitation. My cousin took the money and almost jumped up with excitement. 100,000 for the bride price and 30,000 for the 3 golds. Just right. Sister Zixing, you are really our family's lucky star. I did not attend my cousin's wedding because I really didn't want to see my aunt's family succeed, and especially I didn't want to face my sister's look that made me feel heartbroken. After the wedding, my cousin and his wife returned to the city where they worked. The betrothal gift that was supposed to be a formal gift was taken away by my cousin. The interest rates on many lending platforms were ridiculously high, and my sister had no ability to repay the loan and was in arrears for several months. With the interest compounded, the penalty and interest generated are almost catching up with the principal. Then, my sister started to receive threatening text messages and debt collection calls. Gradually, relatives and colleagues around her also received debt collection messages. The restaurant was worried that debt collectors would come and affect business, so it eventually fired my sister with an excuse. At that moment, my sister had lost all hope and could only ask my aunt for help helplessly. But unexpectedly, the aunt slapped her hard in the face. You little slut. How dare you ask me for money? If you hadn't been wandering around the house in shorts, my boyfriend wouldn't have been seduced by you. If you really need money, just go ahead and sell it. It's not your first time anyway. Her words were like a knife, stabbing into my heart. My hands were shaking slightly as I held the phone. I felt mixed emotions as I listened to my sister calmly recounting everything she had experienced. You know what? My aunt once said that she wanted to adopt me as her daughter and add my name to their household registration book. My sister's voice was a little cold, but the bitterness behind it was self-evident. That day, I found out that she had not even gone through the procedures to transfer her household registration. My sister continued, her tone still calm. She said that when she adopted me, she was ready to eat me up and throw me away. Hearing these words, I felt a pain like a thunderbolt. My sister finally came to her senses, but the hole she had made was too big, and I was powerless to save her. My sister seemed to understand my silence. Her tone became more relaxed. I'm not asking for your help. I just want to apologize to you. I scolded you too loudly before. As it turns out, I was wrong. I felt mixed emotions, knowing her helplessness, but I still asked, Sister, what are your plans for the future? My sister smiled and said, Don't worry, it's better to live a miserable life than to die a good death. However, I will make those bad guys pay the price. Her tone was light, but I knew she had made her decision. It wasn't long before the price my sister mentioned was reported in the news. A surveillance video from the intersection shocked everyone. In the video, my sister and my aunt were standing side by side on the road. Suddenly, a heavy truck came from behind. My sister suddenly took a step back and pushed my aunt hard. My aunt was pushed into the traffic, and the driver hurriedly stepped on the brakes, but the inertia was too great, and my aunt was still rolled in by the wheels. Then, the screen was filled with red liquid and body parts, and the scene was bloody and horrible. My sister stood there, her eyes blank, with an almost invisible smile on her lips. She took out her cell phone, called the police, and described everything that had happened with a blank expression. In the video, the elder sister calmly recounted her experiences. My aunt cheated me out of my money and house, and I lost my bright future. I gave everything for my cousin and took care of my uncle, but in the end, he betrayed me. I was raped by my aunt's boss, and my aunt helped destroy the evidence. I was cheated by my cousin into taking out an online loan. At the end of the video, the elder sister sighed lightly and continued. I don't understand why good people don't get good rewards. My aunt and cousin are my beloved relatives. I treat them with all my heart, but why do they want to harm me? This video quickly sparked widespread discussion. The media encrypted the faces and voices of the parties involved in the incident, but in the comment section, I released the specific information of all the people involved in the incident without hesitation. One stone can cause 1,000 ripples, and the entire network is shaken. It turned out that my aunt's boss was a repeat offender. Several girls came forward to accuse my aunt's boss of sexual harassment or assault, and provided a lot of evidence. My aunt's boss was immediately fired and subsequently detained by the Public Security Bureau. My cousin's wife learned the truth of the matter, found out the source of the bride price, saw through my cousin's true nature, and chose to divorce without hesitation. My aunt passed away, my cousin's wife got divorced, and my colleagues around me were talking about it. Finally, my cousin couldn't bear the mental pressure anymore, so he resigned and returned to his hometown. However, the matter did not end there. Some irregular lending platforms learned the truth about my cousin's debt and arranged for people to wait near my cousin's home. As soon as my cousin returned to the community, he was kidnapped by a group of burly men and threatened to repay his debts. In the end, my cousin had to sell his house to pay off his debts. The huge profits and debts of those platforms were like a monster that could not be escaped, swallowing up everything he had. I looked at my sister with a smile, thinking that she would be happy, but she pointed at herself and said calmly, "Yes, I am a bad person who helped the evil, and I have been punished." I was stunned for a moment, and my heart felt heavy. My sister was sentenced to death for intentional homicide. This sentence hit my heart like a heavy hammer. In my previous life, I was full of resentment towards my sister, thinking that she was too weak and didn't really understand what a sinister human heart was. But in this life, things have developed to the point where I feel now, and I feel infinite sympathy for my sister. It is useless to teach others with 100 words, but an event can teach people a lesson once and for all. I suddenly realized that all the pain my sister had experienced over the years had finally made her see the cruelty of this world. Society is not an ivory tower. Kind hearts are often exploited by those with ulterior motives. My sister's efforts were met with deep hurt and regret. I patted my sister's hand gently and comforted her. "You are not a bad person. You just don't have a clear understanding. The ones who are wrong are your aunt and cousin. They enjoyed your help, but treated you as a fool. They were greedy for profit and broke their promises, making your simple kindness bear a heavy price." My sister lowered her head, seeming somewhat relieved, yet also like she was struggling in deep pain. I finally said goodbye to my sister and returned to school, where I was busy writing papers, defending my dissertation, and doing internships. Although my life was gradually getting organized, the pain in my heart could not be healed. Many years later, the real estate market entered a downturn. House prices began to fall, and I returned to my hometown. The old house that once belonged to my mother was now empty. I bought it back with the money I earned and restored it to the way it was when my mother was alive. Sitting in the chair, I looked at the empty bed, and my thoughts went back to the day when my mother gave her will. If she could live her life over again, would Mom still be willing to live frugally and leave all her savings to me and my sister? I asked myself, will my sister still do everything she can to help others? I felt a pang of sadness in my heart. I couldn't help but wonder again, do they regret it? Days passed by inadvertently, and I found motivation to move forward in him. Looking back, the pains of the past no longer bother me. They have become passers-by in my life journey. I know that everything in the past is just a prelude to a stronger and wiser self. No matter what the future holds, I am no longer afraid because I have learned how to be strong and how to protect what is most important, my family and my current son.